He spoke just one sentence, 12 words, but they echoed across the world, through time, and into history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Neil Armstrong wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't a loud man, but in 1969, with the world watching, he became the first human to walk on the surface of the moon, and, in doing so, became a symbol of courage, science, and the limitless possibility of human exploration. Neil Armstrong was born in Wapakoneta, Ohio, in 1930. From an early age, he was fascinated by flight. At 6, he took his first ride in an airplane. At 15, he earned his student pilot's license. Before he even had a driver's license, quiet and focused, Armstrong was drawn not to spotlight, but to sky. He studied aerospace engineering at Purdue University, became a Navy pilot, and flew 78 combat missions during the Korean War. Afterward, he joined the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which would later become NASA. As a test pilot, Armstrong pushed the edge of possibility, flying the fastest and highest aircraft of the time, including the X-15, which reached the edge of space. By the early 1960s, the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union was in full motion. The Soviets had launched the first satellite, the first man in space, the first woman. The U.S. needed to catch up and then surpass. President John F. Kennedy had declared, before the decade was out, America would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. It was a bold goal, perhaps even impossible, but a new generation of scientists, engineers, and astronauts took it seriously. Neil Armstrong, with his calm under pressure and precision under stress, became part of NASA's second class of astronauts, chosen not for their charisma, but for their capability. In 1966, Armstrong made his first spaceflight as commander of Gemini 8, a critical mission that tested docking in space and nearly ended in disaster. A malfunction sent the spacecraft spinning out of control. Armstrong's calm decision-making and piloting skills saved the mission and his crew. It was a defining moment. The quiet engineer had proven he could lead when everything went wrong. 3 years later, in 1969, he was chosen to command Apollo 11, the mission that would attempt the impossible. Alongside Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, Armstrong prepared for humanity's first journey to the lunar surface. The mission launched on July 16, 1969, atop the massive Saturn V rocket. Millions watched. The stakes were monumental. Every step had to be perfect. 4 days later, the spacecraft entered lunar orbit. Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module, Ego, and began their descent. As they approached the moon's surface, alarms sounded. The landing site was rougher than expected. Fuel was running low. Armstrong took manual control. He guided the craft to a safe landing, touching down with only seconds of fuel remaining. Then, the words that still give goosebumps. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong opened the hatch and stepped onto the moon. Cameras captured the moment. His boot pressed into the fine, gray dust. He spoke the now immortal words. Back on Earth, hundreds of millions held their breath. In that moment, humanity became a multi-planetary species. The moonwalk lasted just over 2 hours. Armstrong and Aldrin planted the American flag, collected samples, conducted experiments, and left behind a plaque. We came in peace for all mankind. But the symbolic weight was far greater. The mission proved that human ingenuity, when fueled by vision and courage, could reach beyond the Earth. After returning home, the astronauts were celebrated around the world. But Neil Armstrong did not seek attention. He gave few interviews. He avoided politics and fame. He had done his job, and done it well. He later taught aerospace engineering at the University of Cincinnati and served on NASA commissions, including investigations into the Challenger disaster. What made Armstrong unique was not only his achievement, but his humility. He understood that the moon landing was not about one man, but about thousands of people. Scientists, technicians, seamstresses, mathematicians, and dreamers who had worked together to reach an impossible goal. He represented them. He carried their hopes and brilliance across 250,000 miles of space. Armstrong's legacy is not just in where he went, but in what he stood for. He embodied the spirit of exploration, the triumph of reason, and the belief that humans could reach for the stars without losing sight of what it meant to be human. He passed away in 2012, at the age of 82, quietly, as he had lived. But his name remains etched, not just in history books, but on the very fabric of human imagination. His footsteps are still there, untouched, in the lunar dust. Neil Armstrong didn't ask to be a hero. He simply did what was asked of him, with quiet excellence and fearless precision. And in doing so, he took us all a little farther than we had ever gone before. In a world often driven by noise and ego, Armstrong reminded us that sometimes the greatest leaders are the ones who speak softly, act precisely, and look up, not to be admired, but to explore.